Welcome to Adult Education at Covenant Presbyterian Church. This is the Adult Education presentation for February 27th. It's a joy to be here and a joy to learn and grow together. Let us pray. Holy and gracious God, we give thanks for this day and for the people that you place in our lives, for the opportunities you give us to grow with one another, and for the time to be and serve and learn as your people. Amen. All right, well, now I'm going to turn it over to Covenant member Melissa Hardy to lead us in a wonderful class today. Here you go, Melissa.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, whew, my face is big on the spotlight. All right, well, thankfully we'll be watching screen most of the time. So welcome today. We're going to go through kind of an overview of the New Testament, which is like a lot to chunk through in one session. So obviously this will be kind of high level. What I'm going to do now is go ahead and share my screen. I've got some slides prepared. And because I'm like spotlighted, I guess if somebody has a question that comes up, I may not see it. So is there someone maybe on the Adult Ed committee who can let me know if something comes up? I'll just assume somebody's saying yes. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And it should, uh-oh, wait a minute. I don't want to share that screen. Hold on. When I did that, could you see like my entire desktop?
No.
What did you see?
I still see you.
You still see me? Okay.
Yeah.
Hang on. I use Teams for work, not Zoom, so this could be a little bumpy here in the beginning.
I think it's usually the frame that's furthest to the left in their selection options, but may differ for you.
In their selection options. When I hit share screen, it literally did like the whole. Okay, we're gonna try it again. Oh, here we go. Yay, yay. Thanks, Barb. And I need to share sound and optimize. Okay. Please tell me you see a big thing that says New Testament overview.
Yes. Yeah.
Yay.
It's perfect.
All right. We are on our way. All right. So obviously you're here to learn about the New Testament today, but I couldn't just cover the New Testament. I also had to put in a shameless plug for our upcoming adult education classes that we have. So just wanted to kind of reiterate that our calling here is learning God's love and living God's love. And so our goal through Adult Ed is to provide the forum in order to do that. So as Pastor Charlie said in the service that Lent is about to start, it actually starts this Tuesday, the 2nd. And during Lent, our sermon series is Let's Talk About Jesus. And we'll be focused mainly on the book of John, which is one of the 4 gospels in the New Testament. So we thought it would be nice to kick off the Lenten season. And let me see if I can figure out how to use the laser pointer. That might be a little too much. We won't do that. So anyways, we thought it would be nice to kick off kind of this Lenten season with an overview of the New Testament with the goal of putting the book of John in context. So today we'll be learning about the New Testament, how it connects to the Old Testament and the storyline of the New Testament. And then next week here on 3-6, Pastor Charlie is going to lead a class to help us learn about Lent, what it is, and how we can celebrate it meaningfully. And then the following week, I'll be back on task to provide an overview of the book of John, which is, again, more the structure and the storyline to, again, help us build that context for our Lenten season. So that's what we're doing. But here's what's coming up. Okay, so as we embark on today's class, there is going to be a lot of information shared in a short period of time. So hang in there with me. The source for today's video is an organization called Bible Project. And this organization was founded in Portland, Oregon in 2014. And I just wanted to spend a minute kind of explaining what they do, because it will be a resource that is used, throughout adult ed from time to time. So these two in the picture are John Collins and Dr. Tim Mackey. And they actually first met as roommates in college and then did kind of their own thing. And while Tim Mackey, who's the one on the right, was a pastor, he was called to kind of put together this team that basically builds videos to help bring the Bible to life. So fun fact is that Tim has a connection to Madison. He actually received his PhD in Semitic languages and biblical studies at UW-Madison. So here's the Bible Project's mission. Our mission is to help people experience the Bible as a unified story that leads to Jesus. Bible Project is a nonprofit animation studio that produces short form, fully animated videos to make the biblical story accessible to everyone, everywhere. We create videos, podcasts, and study guides that explore the Bible's unified story by focusing on its overarching themes and each book's literary design. We are committed to understanding the Bible and its historical context and communicating its wisdom for the modern world. Ultimately, we want to change how people read and use the Bible. So I encourage you to check out their site. I put it down below, bibleproject.com. And this is not an advertisement, but this is a really great free resource that's out there. When I kind of let people know about it and they kind of stumble into it, I've received positive feedback. So anyway, since they started in 2014, they've created over 100 videos to serve this mission of helping people experience the Bible as a unified story that leads to Jesus. And most videos are between 5 and 10 minutes long, so it's not this huge time commitment. Needless to say, there is a lot packed into every video. So that's just the background of who put together what we're going to be watching today. And then after the video, we are going to walk through a high-level timeline of the Bible and then have some time for observations and questions. Are there any questions so far? Okay. So I always like to do this, give you some things to think about prior to the class starting. So here's some things to think about. Like I said, there's going to be a lot of information packed into a short period of time. So think about what is something new or surprising that you learned, and what do you want to learn more about? And in adult ed, we're always looking for suggestions on what people are interested in. So if something in here really kind of sparks your interest, I'd love to know about that, so we can see about incorporating that into adult ed sometime in the future. So without further ado, here's the Bible Project video on the New Testament overview. And it is going to be, I think, a little over 8 minutes long. And so once that is done, we will regroup. And if someone can please let me know if if someone can let me know if they can't hear the video through the chat, that would be appreciated. Uh-oh. There we go.
The New Testament. If you open up a Bible to its table of contents, you'll see it's made up of 2 large collections, the Old and New Testaments. The word testament
Just pausing it for a sec. Can everyone hear that? Can anyone hear it?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, great. Thank you.
to a covenant partnership, which is what both of these collections are all about. They tell one epic and complicated story of God's covenant partnership with Israel and all humanity. The Old Testament is called Tanakh in Jewish tradition. It's a unified scroll collection of 39 Israelite texts that were over 1,000 years in the making. In contrast, the 27 books of the New Testament all came into existence within 30 to 40 years of each other. They were all written by first-generation followers of Jesus. From an early period, Christian communities began collecting these texts and reading them alongside the Old Testament as one unified story that leads to Jesus. The New Testament begins with 4 narrative books that together are called the Gospel. They tell the story of Jesus of Nazareth's life, death, and resurrection as an announcement of good news. They're followed by a 5th narrative work called Acts of the Apostles. Here, the risen Jesus commissions the apostles, a word that means the sent ones. They're appointed as Jesus' representatives to spread the good news about him throughout the ancient world. After Acts comes a collection of letters from the apostles. These were written to provide teaching and guidance for local communities of Jesus' followers called churches. There are 13 letters connected to the Apostle Paul, and they're not arranged in the order of when they were written, but rather from the longest to the shortest. Then there's the letter to the Hebrews, written by a close but unnamed associate of the apostles. After this are the letters of James, Jude, Peter, and John. 2 were brothers of Jesus, and 2 were among his first followers. The last New Testament book is the Revelation, a letter to 7 churches that reveals a prophetic word of challenge and comfort to all of Jesus' followers. So those are the books of the New Testament, but what are they about? And how do they connect with the Old Testament to make up one unified story? Think of it this way. The Bible is one long epic narrative with multiple movements or acts. The Old Testament recounts the first series of acts that give you everything you need to make sense of the story to follow. The core themes and the plot conflict are arranged in design patterns. And then in the New Testament, these are all picked up and carried forward to the story's culmination in Jesus. Let me show you what I mean. The first act is about God and all humanity. God provides a sweet garden temple for humans who are made to be God's partners in ruling the world. But the humans are foolish, and they give in to a dark temptation and rebel against God's wisdom. So they're exiled into a wilderness where they start killing each other. They build cities that spread their selfishness and oppression, leading up to the big bad city of Babylon. But God loves the world and its foolish humans, so he sets in motion a rescue plan by promising the arrival of a new human who will destroy the evil that has lured us into self-destruction. The next act of the biblical story is about God and Israel, and it develops the themes and patterns of the first act. God calls a new humanity out of Babylon into a sweet garden land. Abraham, Sarah, and his descendants, the Israelites. God promises that through them, divine blessing will be restored to all of the nations. Surely these are the new humans that we're waiting for, but the Israelites repeat humanity's rebellion against God, building their own violent cities that lead to self-destruction and another exile in Babylon. But God sustains his promise that the new human will come from Abraham's lineage. It will be a priest king who will now have to rescue both Israel and humanity from Babylon to restore God's blessing to the world. Now, notice how these 2 acts are designed according to the same pattern. The second act is a longer and more violent version of the first, and together they explore the tragic human condition, but they also highlight God's promise, which is developed more in the next act, the Old Testament prophets and poets. The prophets accused Israel and all nations of their evil, and they announced that one day God himself would arrive to bring the day of the Lord and deliver his world from Babylon. He would do it through a promised royal priest who's going to suffer like a slave and die for the sins of Israel and all humanity, but then he'll be exalted as king over the nations. He will call others to leave Babylon and join the new covenant people who will partner with God to rule over a new Jerusalem, that is, over a new creation. And so the Old Testament concludes by anticipating a new act in the story. And when you turn to the New Testament, it's the same story, now being carried forward in Jesus. Let's see how. The 4 gospel accounts introduce Jesus of Nazareth, both as the promised son of Abraham who will restore God's blessing to the nations, and also as that new human who will defeat evil and restore humanity to partnership with God. So Jesus is portrayed as a human, and more. He went about announcing the arrival of God's promised kingdom, and he spoke and acted as if he was Israel's divine king. But instead of calling himself king, Jesus referred to himself as the Son of Man, that is, the human one who would act like a servant. The Gospels are making the claim that in Jesus, Israel's God has become the faithful Israelite and the true human that we are all made to be but have failed to be. Jesus' mission was to confront that dark evil that lurks underneath humanity's evil, luring us into selfishness, violence, and death. But how do you defeat that kind of evil? The surprising answer in the Gospels is that Jesus overcame our evil by allowing it to kill him on his paradoxical throne, the cross, where Jesus died for humanity's evil and sin. And it's where he lived out what he taught, that nonviolence, forgiveness, and self-giving love are the most powerful things in the universe. And because God's love for his world is stronger than evil or death, Jesus was raised to new life as the prototype of a new humanity, and this brings us to the story of Acts. Through the Spirit, God empowers Jesus' followers to spread the life and love of Jesus out into the world as they invite people to leave their old humanity and join Jesus' multi-ethnic family, the new humanity. This is where the letters from the apostles fit into the story. Here, the apostles address early Christian communities, and they show how the good news about the risen King Jesus changed history and should reshape every part of our lives. They also explained the good news by constantly appealing to stories from the Old Testament and the stories of Jesus, showing us how to see our own life stories as part of the epic biblical story. So all humanity is trapped in a Babylonian exile, but Jesus came to create a new home. We're all living in different kinds of Egyptian slavery to selfishness and sin, but Jesus died as the Passover lamb to liberate us into the promised land. Our old humanity is bound for the dust of death, but Jesus' resurrection opened up a new future for a new humanity. We live here in the current evil age, but through Jesus and the Spirit, a new creation has burst open here and now. And this leads us to the book of Revelation, where the whole biblical story comes together in powerful symbolism and imagery. Jesus is portrayed as a slaughtered, bloody lamb, who is exalted as the divine king of the world. He's leading his people out of slavery and exile in Babylon. And as they resist Babylon's influence, they may have to suffer alongside their slain leader. But when you follow the risen king, not even death can prevent the dawn of the new creation, which is here depicted as a new Jerusalem garden temple, the true home of humanity after its long exile. And so on the Bible's last page, heaven and earth are reunited, and the new humans take up their appointed task from the Bible's first page, to rule the world together in the love and power of God. The New Testament is a remarkable collection of documents. They represent the testimony of the apostles that points us to the risen Jesus himself. And through God's Spirit, these human words have been speaking a divine word of hope from the 1st century to the 21st. Each book shows how God, through Jesus and the Spirit, is leading our world to its ultimate goal in a renewed creation. And so the story's end is really the beginning of a new story that is yet to be told. And that's what the New Testament is all about.
I'm going to stop sharing for a sec. What'd you guys think? It's a lot in a short period of time.
Yeah, that was amazing. It's a really good story. It's almost like, are we crazy for believing that? But we know we're not.
Yeah.
That's very well done. Good overview from 40,000 feet or whatever.
Right? Yeah. I think of it as kind of the Cliff Notes version, but it's helpful for me because I know when I think back like 10 years ago, I had very little biblical knowledge outside of kind of the, cursory, here's the key biblical stories that everyone needs to know, like the top 10, like Charlie would say. And I appreciate having context before I read the book because, and again, this was like a whole series of books, but I can't, people who know me know I'm like obsessed with the Bible Project, but I can't recommend them enough because they've got one of those videos for every single book of the Bible. And so it's great is just stay like, okay, let's figure out what this is about. Because for me, I tend to get a little bit lost in the sauce of like who beget who and, who a lot of the language can be a little bit tough. So anyways, but it's a ton that's packed into a short period of time. I saw Nan gave a thumbs up. Thanks, Nan.
It's a question, and I thank you, Melissa, for continuing to introduce us to the Bible Project. It is an awesome opportunity for us to learn. My guess is that that video could have been a little overwhelming for some people because it's really fast, but it's the sort of thing that I think is worth going back to. And Melissa, you made reference to 10 years ago when you knew little, and you've been on a journey for, well, more than 10 years, but let's just talk about 10 years of reading and learning. And it's just because we watched an 8-minute video about the New Testament doesn't mean we're experts. It might feel a little overwhelming. The best way to, journey of 1,000 miles begins with a step. We have a step this season of Lent to read the Gospel of John. Might be good to watch the Bible Project video on the Gospel of John. Might be good to read the Gospel of John and circle back to this same 8-minute video again and see if it makes a little bit more sense when you're reading John. That's why I regularly encourage people, as much as possible, regular habits, daily habits, weekly habits of just hearing God's word and wrestling and trying to let it take root. So this is great. Thanks. And just I'll stop after this. Just an FYI, if you've never read John's Gospel before, it is a little challenging, tricky. It's a little different than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. There's some long sections in there that you might say, huh, what? And that's okay. You're in good company, because a lot of people say, huh, what, to some of the things in the gospel, especially John's Gospel.
Thanks, Charlie. Yeah, so you may not want to watch the videos for the Bible Project, John, because we'll be doing those in 2 weeks. But you can always watch it in advance, but that's just the spoiler alert. That's what we'll be doing in 2 weeks for the overview. Okay, so now we're kind of clicking to the second part, which is to walk through the timeline, which can be very daunting. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. It's not a video. It's a couple of slides and me talking. So jump in when you want to. Share.
The New Testament.
Sorry.
If you open
See, I like it so much, I wanted to watch it again. All right, so we're going to go through the Bible timeline, and something very similar to this is actually still maybe hanging in one of the adult ed meeting rooms down on the first floor at Covenant. But I kind of put it together because I'm a very visual person, and I need to basically digest information visually to get the full picture. So this is probably incredibly daunting, but hang with me for a minute. And I'm going to do the laser pointer. I found it. All right, can you guys see the laser pointer?
And Melissa, did you do this yourself?
I did, yes.
Wow.
This lady's organized.
I did, yeah. I mean, I used a lot of resources, which I have, referenced down here below. But so let me explain what this is. So this is the timeline of the Old Testament. So up the top, we've got the years. So if it's too small for you to see, we have starting at the beginning, which is how the Bible starts. And then from an actual year standpoint, it starts at about 2200 BC. And this goes all the way to basically the Common Era. So the way this is broken out is the different sections of the Bible. So the first 5 books are the law or the Torah. Then we've got the next section, which is the history books. And what you'll be able to see here is what time span each book covers. So not when it was written, but when the events that are mentioned are supposedly take place. And there's a lot of variations across published works of when things occurred. So that's my huge disclaimer in all of this is this was my best understanding from multiple resources out there, but I'm sure something else is going to say something different. So use it just directionally. So for example, Genesis, and then I've got the key theme of the book next to it. So Genesis, which is the story of the beginning, covers a huge time span, huge, way longer than any other book that's out there, which kind of piques my interest in, for one thing, explaining maybe why it's so difficult to actually work through the book of Genesis if you start there. But it's a huge time span that covers. And just want to add up here that in the video, they talked about Act 1, which was Genesis 1 through 11. And that's really the beginning portion. And then Act 2 really covers all the way up to about 1300 BC. And then Act 3 covers the rest. So these are those 3 acts that they referenced. So anyways, we've got the law, the history. So the law covers, essentially from the beginning all the way up to about 1400. Then the history books, so Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. They take us from basically where the law ends, for about 1400, all the way up until about 400. So there's a huge time span that's covered there as well. Then we get into the poetry and wisdom books. And we've got this one little outlier here, which is Job, which is actually set during the book of during the time frame where the book of Genesis takes place. And then the rest of the books are really overlapping here in Act 3. The major prophets, so the next section is really the prophets, but it's broken into the major and the minor prophets. And so again, I think he shared that these are, am I right about this, Charlie? They're not in order by book. That's in the New Testament, right? They're not in order by length. That's the New Testament. Right?
Yeah, I don't know of a particular reason for the order in which they are in. There probably is some logic to it, but.
So anyways, the major prophets really highlighted this time between about 800 and 500 BC. And then the minor prophets were slightly bookended on either end of that. So after basically the Old Testament, which again ends around 400 BC-ish, there is this period of kind of, I'm going to say air quotes, nothing. It's called the intertestamental period. So this is this kind of 400-year span that is dark, at least in the Bible. Is that a fair statement, Charlie?
It's dark in our Bible, but there are apocryphal texts and other texts that certainly talk about people's relationship with God during that time. But yeah, it's sort of a curious gap.
So the other thing, go ahead, sorry.
I'm just saying it's sort of a curious gap for us, the way our Bible is.
So the other thing I wanted to mention is in the video, they talked about the Old Testament being written over a span of about 1,000 years and the New Testament being written over a span of about 40 years. So although it was written over about 1,000 years-ish, you can see that the time frame that's covered is actually much, much longer than that. So I just want to distinguish between those two things. Any, this is a loaded question. Any questions on the Old Testament before we move to the New Testament?
I have a quick question. Was there something that happened in history during that dark period that's like notable? Does anyone know? Like, was the church being radically oppressed then, or when was that? That was way, way back, right?
Well, it's 400 BC.
Yeah, so there was no church as we know it, technically, until Jesus came around.
Right. So what was going, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
There was the rise of Caesar. There were empires around the world. I think that's when the Great Wall was, I'm not positive, but I think the Great Wall was built at that point. And the Jews were persecuted in that time. And I believe that's where we get some of the celebrations from Hanukkah. But maybe somebody knows more about that than I do.
I can speak to some of this. So that was primarily the Hellenization and then the creation of not only the canonization that is the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, but also you have they're kind of equivalent of how they do a lot of the rituals around Hanukkah, around the rabbi traditions. There was during this time.
Wasn't that time, during that time, the prophets were quiet? Israel was not hearing any word from God. That was my understanding. The prophets were quiet. There was no word from God.
I mean, as Charlie mentioned, there's some writings there. Maccabees, I think, is the one that comes to mind where a lot is talked about. It just wasn't dictated as part of the canon that they wanted to keep as part of their Bible for the Hebrew Bible, as opposed to what happens within Maccabees and during that time is where Hanukkah comes from.
But was God?
But it's just not in the Bible.
But was God speaking to the nation of Israel at that time?
I don't know if we're able to say that confidently. Was God speaking or just silent for 400 years? Or just who wrote it or who didn't write it?
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I don't want us to get too stuck here, but yeah, thank you.
No, I'm actually, the reason, if you can see me, I'm looking down is because I have this great chart, which is all of the kind of biblical history overlaying what's happening in world history at the same time. So what I'd be happy to do is scan the intertestamental period, and I can certainly have that put out on the adult ed site as a reference, because there's way too much on here for me to read.
Yeah, cool, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Anything else? All right, we'll move to the New Testament. All right, so here's the timeline of the New Testament. So a couple things I want to bring to your attention. I'm hoping you guys can see you can see this whole slide, right? I have something on top of mine, but I just want to make sure you can see it.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so again, we talked in the video about the sections. So there's the Gospels, the Acts of the Apostle, Paul's letters. So this whole section here is called the letters, but these here were written by Paul, and the second section was written by others. And then Revelations, Revelation, I do that all the time. Revelation, there's no S, happens at the very end. So the best understanding is that actually the New Testament starts, the story of the New Testament starts at around 4 to 6 years before the Common Era, BC, because Jesus was actually born and John the Baptist were born before the year 0. Is anyone? Joe, I'm going to ask for your confirmation on that. You sound like you're in the thick
We'll
of it.
give that confirmation. What I will also clarify is this is when these books take place, not necessarily when they were written.
Correct. Yes, thank you. When these take place, exactly. Yeah. So, and what they said in the video was the writing of these books all happens within about 40 years or so. And so I believe it's kind of like the late 50s up to about the year 100 when that writing happened. Does that sound close?
Yeah, that's around the right time. Understanding that the second temple or the temple falls in 70, I believe it is. And that's where 79, and that's where that crux of why things are written in a certain way or not in a certain way.
So spending a little bit more time here than we did on the Old Testament, you know, there's 4 Gospels. What we often hear is that these Gospels all kind of cover the same story, but from different vantage points. But what's important to understand here is really Matthew and Luke are the 2 books. Now I'm second guessing myself. Is that right? Yes. Matthew and Luke are the 2 books that really cover the full lifetime of Jesus. And then both Mark and John cover basically the 3 years of his public ministry. Is that a fair way for me to say that? Hopefully.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. All right, so then we obviously end the Gospels with the death of Jesus, and Acts is the story of the early church. So kind of, Charlie, back to your comment a few minutes ago, that really the church didn't start as we know it now until we went into the New Testament. And so the culmination of the birth of the early church and Paul doing all of his travels takes place really in this about 30 AD to about 55 AD. Then the letters, this is actually, the dates that are here are more corresponding to my best understanding of when the letters were written, because now we're kind of in a different situation. These are stories and timelines, and now these are letters of encouragement to different congregations and cities and people. So these dates here are more when the books were actually written to these different congregations, cities, and people. And this was kind of fun to figure out, because if you go through Paul's journeys and where he is, you can kind of map back to like where they talk about where he's located when he writes each of the books. And that's how you can kind of figure out when the books were written. At least that's how I did it. So anyways, this whole period takes place from about 50 to 65. So in terms of about 15 years when Paul is writing all these letters. And you can see a big chunk of them took place while he was actually actively part of his journeys. And then some took place after the fact, many when he was actually, I believe, imprisoned. And then the general letters, who are written by two congregations, churches, but were not written by Paul. You can see the bookends here are a little bit wider. And although I said the New Testament covers about 100 years in time, there is also this big future block, which is Revelations, because Revelation, there I go again, because this is, something that has not happened yet. So kind of in closing here, we'll be covering the Gospel of John. So this kind of gives you some context here for Lent. The Gospel of John covers the active period of Jesus's public ministry. So these kind of three years. And the key theme of John is that God's love transforms and unites all believers. Any questions on this before I move off of the slide?
Melissa, I'll just chime in real quick. Thank you for putting this together. This is tremendous, and it's a very, very helpful framework. That said, from most biblical scholarship is it's a process of learning and discovery. And as much as we want precision with things, most of the time when you read introductions, people say, we think the Bible was written, or that this book was written at this time. And like in particular, the book of Ephesians and Colossians, most biblical scholars, not all, think that those were written by like disciples of Paul and maybe not Paul himself. We need to remember that we are much more a verbal and written culture than they were. There was much more of a sense of the oral tradition. The Gospels weren't written until a long time after Jesus, and it's a bad example. And I certainly don't want to equate myself to Jesus, but the very, very rough equivalent would be like if I preached a sermon on Easter Sunday and then people talked about it for a few years, and then 10 years later somebody wrote it down. That would be very roughly analogous to what happened with the Gospels. The people were telling stories about Jesus, what he did, and then wrote them down a long time after. So biblical and then they were transmitted all over the place. It's not like there's one chunk that says this is the Bible. There's different fragments, different pieces. So biblical scholars put these things together. It's like this huge detective work. And who knows, tomorrow somebody might find a new manuscript that sheds new light on meaning in the gospel according to Matthew or whatever. So it's an ongoing process of revelation. It's not like we just have this big chunk of books that was written 2,000 years ago that says, hey, this is the New Testament, all cut and dried. So it can be frustrating for those of us who like precision, but it's also kind of exciting. And it invites us into Bible study to ask, listen, wrestle, and be open to learning new things.
Yeah, good disclaimer. And I should have, every slide I should have said ish with all the dates, ish, because we don't know. But this for me was helpful, at least in understanding sort of the progression, even though it's ish. All right, let me turn off this pointer. No, it's like stuck. Uh-oh, here we go. Okay, turn off the laser pointer. Okay, so up for discussion now, and I'll take it. Let's see. Here, I'll put these in the chat. Oh no, my pointer's back on. I'm going to stop sharing and I will put these little questions in the chat, and we definitely have a good 10 minutes or so for discussion. So I will stop sharing. All right. I believe I have stopped sharing.
Yes, you have. And feel free, anybody, I'm peeking through the chat, see any hands that are up or any questions. You could also just feel free to chime in. Okay, so I'm going to try to find my little questions. I can put those in the chat. Hang on.
Does anyone know if that big long poster is still in that room that goes through?
I can confirm that it is.
I spent a long time and just walking around that room. It's when the building reopens, it's pretty cool.
I did notice that the Genesis time span fell off, at least the last time I saw it. So I'll have to go replace it. Yeah, and I'm seeing a couple of questions. Thank you. Thank you for some of the thank yous in here. That's Eric's, yep, saying that the timeline of what happened in the world. Yeah, and I'll definitely, I'll put what I have, I'll scan it in and post that. And I'll post this deck too, for those of you who are asking about the chart. So what was something new or surprising that you learned in this overview?
The Bible Project. So I have a personal question. Like, when did you find out about the Bible Project? And how long have you been watching Bible Project videos? And
I learned about the Bible Project, man, I think maybe 3 years ago. And I have watched most of their videos. They do videos on each book of the Bible, and then they also do themes. So Brenda, just saying, there's one on the Holy Spirit, which I know is one of your faves. And then they also do like word studies. So they've got a lot of different material out there. And then this year, they finally, I know, because I'm like a fangirl of it. So they finally launched an app. And now all of their videos are actually also available on the app, which is pretty cool. And they do this whole like read through the Bible based on the storylines. And then as you read through it, there's podcasts and videos that you can plug into to help understand it better. So it's really cool.
so do you just get a subscription to it or something?
Everything's free. No subscription.
Really? Oh, wow. I'm joining.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You You can also
But they-
sign up for emails and get an email every week about like, verse or topic that they're talking about.
But they do run on donations, right?
They do. They are all, yes. So they run on donations. They basically have at the bottom of their screen kind of like where they sit with funding for the month. So we have a covenant. We have donated to them in the past. Anything else new or surprising?
I learned how good it is to have an active enrolled seminarian in on these conversations. It's a lot fresher for her than it is for anyone else here. Well, for me, I'll say.
Yay, Joe.
Yes.
Yeah, if you guys have further questions, I just took Old Testament. I'm in New Testament right now. Happy to give you a gut check on stuff.
Fantastic. All right.
Hey, actually, I'm downstairs in the room here. And I've got it on fuzzy background. I can't show you, but I took a picture of the timeline, and it's still down here. There's some missing pieces and some tape on the wall, but it's here. Melissa, I'll send you the picture.
I
Maybe you can-
actually have the pictures on my phone.
Okay,
But thank you.
but it's here. Yeah.
Good to hear that.
Oh, and Melissa, thanks for doing that timeline. I learned that there was that period, way back when it looks like nothing was happening. And now I'm really curious about what was going on in history. Yeah, and I meant to say the synagogue, not the church, but I just wondered what was like going on spiritually then. Yeah. And then there was this dark, which seems to me like a void or a dark time. So now I'm really curious about that. Yeah, so thanks
I'd
for that.
recommend reading the apocryphal texts. I find them interesting, even if they're not part of we consider the Bible, but what is part of like the Catholic canon with Maccabees and things like that, and is very closely aligned with Jewish tradition even nowadays. I don't know, it's fun to read like the extra credit of the Bible, if you will, things that you maybe haven't heard before in sermons and stuff.
Oh,
You can always find it online.
I like that extra credit. It's great. Yeah, and I should say one of the things that I learned in this is I really appreciated the kind of the 3 acts that they broke the Old Testament into, and then how they connected the Gospels, especially with kind of how it was, I'm going to use the wrong words, but how in the Old Testament there was this, prophecy of what was to come, and then in the New Testament they connected that, I think, very cleanly and obviously at a much higher level than that doesn't give credit to all of the connections, but I liked that. All right, so kind of next question then is, what do you want to learn more about? We want to hear from you on what are topics that you want to learn. And you don't have to like spew them out all right now. Feel free to send an email, but want to make sure that we're capturing the needs of the congregation as we put together adult ed. So any other comments or thoughts? Otherwise, we can wrap it up. All right. Thanks, everyone. Oh,
Thank
what?
you.
You're welcome. All right. Thanks all. Have a good day.
Thank you.
I'll
Bye.
close us off with a prayer.
That was awesome.
Oh, Jeff is closing us up with a prayer. Sorry, Jeff.
Oh, yeah.
That's all right. That's all right. Still got one in me. Let's pray. Holy and gracious God, we give thanks for your word, for the ways in which it speaks to us and the ways in which we are able to use it and internalize it and put it in our hearts for our lives. We give thanks for the fresh hearts that hear the word, and for the hands and feet that translate it into your action. Help us to understand, and having understanding, help us to love. Help us to be your people, and put up in us hearts for your kingdom. Amen.
Amen. And then just a reminder, we've got a congregational meeting at noon and what was it called? Spiritual stroll at 2:00.
That's at Picnic Point. It's not at Owens anymore. It's a Picnic Point. So get there.
All right. Thanks all. See you later.
Thank you, Melissa.
Bye.
Bye.